Hello and welcome to On the Ball on ESPN Cricinfo, another session with Dale Steyn. Today's topic, Dale, we all set to give us your gyan, as we call in India, on bowling in England.
Perfect. Yeah, let's give it a crack.
Just to get into the mood, I've made sure my room is also set at about 16 degrees so that you feel that you're in England, because this topic is going to be about bowling in England and consider the kind of weather that we've had here. With it's been a while actually seeing Indian players wear full sleeve jumpers and sleeveless jumpers. It's a memory that I used to have from my school days. Seeing these guys wearing jumpers that day.
Yeah, look, England is cold. If you go there early on, I remember a couple, even this season actually, but I remember Hashim playing for Hampshire, and I was gonna go and oversee Hashim when he left playing Hampshire, so I was taking his place. And I was going online and I was watching and picking up these pictures, and Hashim was standing in the slips with a beanie on. So it gets extremely cold. Indians coming from India, where they're so used to the big heat, Chennai and all these places. Yeah, it can't be that comfortable going to England when you have to have these hand warmers and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole different place.
Yeah, it's a great starting point, because that's part of your performance on the field and part of the challenges playing in England. As a bowler, as a fast bowler, is that something that is a big deal, the cold that you get sometimes in England?
Definitely. When you're warming up, you get there on the day to warm up and you go outdoors and you can just feel it's a little bit colder. It takes a little bit longer to get your legs going. The beautiful thing about on the contrast, on the opposite side of that, or the opposite scale of that, when you're playing in a place like Chennai or Durban, Sri Lanka, where it's nice and humid and warm, you feel like you don't even have to warm up. You just walk outside of the dressing room and all of a sudden everything is just loose. Your muscles are nice and ready to go. There's good blood flowing through your body. And this is actual science. This is not just a feeling, You have to warm up when it comes to colder weather. And England, it can get really warm, especially this time of the year around, June-ish, July, when it should be kind of warm, it's summer. But early on in the season, it's really cold. And it takes you a little bit longer to get warmed up. Your body's not moving as good. You're a little bit more stiff than you'd like to. And often you'll see guys running in, they're not bowling at 150, like they would want to bowl, or 145. They're down in the 135s. They bowl a couple more drag down balls. It really is something that you have to acclimatize to. Weather conditions can be really tough on cricketers, especially when you're playing over 5 days. Your legs get tired from already playing, and now you got to deal with the weather too. It's tough.
So what was your routine, Dale, to ensure that the first over that you bowled was up there and you had the control and the speed up as much as possible? So was there a specific routine that you had when you played a test match in England?
Yeah, I just went out there and just try to get as warm as possible, or warmed up as well as possible. We play a little bit of football. I do a lot of running around and actually get a good sweat on. You really want to get a sweat on. In South Africa, I normally go out and do my warm-ups, and then I want to be back in the dressing room like 20 or 30 minutes before the start of play. I want to relax. I might want to have a shower, dry myself off a little bit and get ready for the long day's play. In England, I was kind of the other way around. I'd try and get into the dressing room with maybe 15 minutes to go before day's play, so that when I went out there to bowl, I was still a little bit sweaty. I was still a little bit, good to go. So my body hadn't cooled off just yet. And that was one way of keeping my body going.
I've seen a few bowlers, with talent and speed. They had the gifts to do well in England, but struggled with control. Just couldn't find the right line. There'd be 3 good balls on off stump and then one down the leg side, sometimes a bit too short, sometimes a bit too full. You could see that their mind was telling them something different, but things just don't happen. That's one of the challenges, I guess, in England, where the ball does do a bit in the air, plus if there's a crosswind blowing and stuff like that, can get really tough. So your trick to ensure that didn't happen, and maybe a tip to young players bowling in England, how do you sort of get control despite the conditions being against you?
I think nowadays it's a little bit more difficult. And I know that when I was starting off my first class career, it was pretty, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was a lot more accessible. Was get yourself over into England, play a little bit of club cricket. I know a lot of foreign players that used to go and play, whether they played club cricket or they could get themselves into a county, maybe even play for the seconds or whatever, and just go there because they play so much cricket. They're playing 5-6 days a week, you know, and when you're doing that on repeat all the time, you get used to the conditions a lot quicker. You get used to the weather a lot quicker, and you just become acclimatized to everything, the game, conditions, the weather, and all of that kind of stuff. Nowadays, unfortunately, it's not as easy. But it just boils down to training, really. You know, you've got to kind of speak to somebody that's been there before. If you say you're sitting in India, or you're sitting in Dubai, or you're sitting in Australia, South Africa, it doesn't matter. You speak to somebody who's been there before, who's done well there, or a coach that's been there. You kind of measure out the distance of where you think the ball's going to be in a good length. Get a cone, put it down, and if it's the only nets that you have are indoor nets, you practice as though you're playing at Lord's in those indoor nets, or in Durham or Edgbaston or wherever it is. You just create your own environment wherever you are, through the help of other people that have been there. That seems to be the way in which we do it now. You know, I know when I'm preparing for an IPL or something like that, I'm not in India, but I have to go to the nets and I have to imagine that this is where I am, this is who I'm playing against, this is the length that I have to bowl. It differs to bowling in South Africa and Australia. I put my cone down and I just hit it and try and nail it, ball after ball.
Right, so we are in a typical sort of match. You've got the ball in your hand, you're a swing bowler, you try to swing it, get the ball up. Is it a little tougher? I mean, just by watching from the outside, it seems a little tougher for swing bowlers to get control and bowl exactly the way they want to, rather than guys who like to hit the pitch a meter short. So do you think for swing bowlers especially, there is a little more needed for them to be top gear?
Yeah, and you know, the ball that you're playing with is another thing. You know, the Duke's ball, it does tend to swing more, or for longer than the KOOKABURRA. I found the KOOKABURRA swings, but it swings really late. And you speak to somebody who's probably one of the world's best swing bowlers, Jimmy Anderson. I don't think he particularly enjoys bowling with the KOOKABURRA. You know, he enjoys the Duke, and he's figured out a way and how to control that ball. But for foreigners going to a place like England, where you're playing with the Duke, you can get there and all of a sudden you're swinging it 10 to 15 centimeters more than you would the ball that you're used to bowling with. Now all of a sudden to try and get the ball in the right place is a bit of a mission, you know. So just the ball alone can be quite difficult to learn how to control. I mean, in South Africa, we used to try and get a bunch of Dukes down here. So a month before we were going overseas to England or even to India with the SG, we'd start bowling with them already, starting to acclimatize our fingers. Those seams are very pronounced, and just get used to the amount of swing and the volume of swing that those balls actually have in them. So there's a couple tips for people to kind of get used to. But it's a skill alone, knowing how to control a swinging ball. It's the balls these days, especially the white ball, KOOKABURRA, doesn't swing nearly as much as I found they did couple years ago, and then you'll see guys get into a test match and they'll get this Duke's ball and it's swinging. It looks pretty, but the control is just a whole other ball game. It's so difficult.
So did that ever happen to you, Dale? Because you're talking about getting used to the Duke ball, so you've got used to the seam, you've got a fair idea about how it feels in your hand, but you don't have the conditions like England when you have those balls at home in South Africa. So did it actually happen in a test match for you, where control, which was a given for you, which was something that happened as an autopilot thing, you had to work on?
I found that in hindsight now, I wish that I'd done some of the advice that Kyle Abbott had given me later on in my career. I went to England and I bowled okay in England. I wish that my stats would have been slightly better. But I bowled okay. But I found that if I had done what I did when I was with Hampshire, where I just held the ball more, almost like across the seam, really, and didn't worry too much about the swing. The ball was still going to swing, kind of like wobbled a little bit, and it still kind of swung. But I found that it did a movement a lot later, and like I said, it looks so pretty when you bowl these big swingers and the guy plays forward, and you're up in arms. Oh, he's played and missed. I'm kind of hoping that every single ball he plays and misses, or he nicks it. So it shouldn't really be a surprise for me when he plays and misses it. That's kind of my thinking. So I wish that I'd done that earlier on when I was in England, or just been given that kind of advice. I think I would have found the edge a lot more. The ball wouldn't have swung as much, but I think I would have been a lot more effective in the way that I'd taken wickets.
Would you be able to imagine, just from your playing experience, a red KOOKABURRA ball in England? How it would behave?
I wonder how. I mean, the white balls behave okay. They kind of they do okay. But over 5 days, a little bit
The
of
red ball?
rain. The red ball. The kookaburra doesn't kind of take well to being damp or getting wet. I mean, the one place in South Africa where we have rain issues a lot, and the ground's always damp. You get there the next day is Durban. If you want rain in Durban, just organize a cricket match. It will rain. So, another place they should never have a World Test Championship final. And we've noticed that the ball gets very soggy. It gets damp. It loses its swing. The seam kind of goes inward in the ball. So, maybe the red kookaburra over 5 days in England is not the best choice. The Duke seems to do it just absolutely perfectly. But then you have to learn how to control that ball, because it is sometimes those balls have a mind of their own. They can swing in and swing away. We've seen Mitchell Johnson go to England and struggle with that Duke's ball, and then put a kookaburra in his hand, and he's a whole different animal.
I'm a big fan of length. I've used that a lot in my observations of anybody's bowling. The bowl's a beautiful length. And I was having a chat with Waqar Yunus as well. And I asked him whether line or length, which is the more important thing. He said it has to start with length and then, line. So the length, we keep talking about it. A lot of people watching must be saying, why are these guys harping so much on length? So Dale Steyn, the length that you bowled, and what's the length that you would advise bowlers to bowl on England pitches over at conditions being swinging? What's the ideal length?
Well, the ideal length, I mean, we always talk about this. Jock Callis was amazing at saying this. He used to say, what's the game plan for any batter? He'd say, top or off with the odd bouncer. That was Callis. In every meeting, it just became like a running joke. And it is the truth. Top or off with the odd bouncer is going to do many a good batsman over. The difficult part is trying to find what length top or off is. Different grounds, they've got different bounces, different bounce. Some are low, some bounce more. And that's something that you have to work out. And obviously why you want to go to a stadium or a ground a couple days earlier or weeks earlier to prep and play a couple warm-up games to find that length. But I was always looking for that length. I was always trying to look for the length where I was hitting the stumps. I found that if I was hitting the stumps, especially for a batter's first 20 balls, that's where I'm going to cause him the biggest amount of trouble. After that, I might want to drag my length back a little bit so that I can get him more onto the back foot, and then throw the odd one fuller a little bit to try and then hope that his weight was back. But ideally, the length that you're always looking at getting is a length where it's going to be clipping the top of the stumps.
So I'm just thinking, Dale, that the practice that you would do before the game would be crucial, isn't it? Because there's no batter there, and you've got the stumps lined up, and you're running in and bowling and ensuring that you're hitting the stumps every time. And then you quickly know exactly what the length is. Would that be a crucial aspect of preparation?
Absolutely. And good coaches, good bowling coaches have got their little notebook and they'll write it down for every ground that they go to. I wasn't that kind of player. I kind of felt it was more for me on feel. I wanted to feel the ball out of my hand, and I could almost close my eyes and I could feel, yep, that's it. I've got that length, and I'd just make a note in my brain, and that's where I need to let it go. Not everybody can do that, and it's not a very easy thing to coach. However, you get a coach like Otis Gibson, who was brilliant. You could go to Wanderers, you could go to Newlands, you could go to Chennai, you could go anywhere, and he'd pull out his little book and he'd give you the exact measurements on
as
the last game that they
the
played there, as in meters from the stumps, as to what length you have to measure out for the ball to hit the top of the stumps. Then you'd go put his little markers out there and he'd say, boys, this is your length. And it would change. It would be amazing. You'd be playing in Australia and you would go from Perth to Hobart or wherever it is, and it could change to 30 to 40 centimeters, almost half a meter, in length, even though you're playing in the same country. So Otis was fantastic at that. And just making it absolute notes as to every ground where you went to, what was the length, especially on the last game that you played, what was the length that bowlers bowled to hit the stumps?
Did it matter to you how the batter batted as well? Was it something that you looked for as you ran into bowl in England, that you wanted the batter to be on the front foot, not just defending, but maybe pushing or driving? We've seen 2 wickets already in the World Test Championship, the Indian wickets, where the batters have been out, trying to drive. Were you a big believer in getting the batter just on the front foot or getting them to drive or push?
Yeah, I mean, different batters are do different things. So, you look at Kohli and them, they're coming out of their crease now and they're trying to negate that swing. So it feels like you have to drag your length back. But the moment you drag your length back, then what happens? The ball it's not hitting the stumps anymore. It kind of goes flying over. So therefore, you got to find ways in getting the batter back into his crease. Like, how am I going to get him to go back, into his crease? So you might go a spell or two, and I say a spell, it could be 3 overs or 2 overs, where you go a little bit shorter and you're forcing him to say, okay, cool, he's not going to go full. I'm going to have to go back into my crease. And the guys at point or square leg will always send a message to mid-off or mid-on and say, please tell the bowler that the batter is batting a little bit out of his crease or he's batting deeper in the crease. But for me, I always felt like it didn't matter whether the batter was coming at me or going deeper in the crease. I still needed to hit the stumps. I needed to find the length that was going to hit the stumps, because regardless of where he was batting, if the ball wasn't hitting the stumps, my bowled, my LBW completely out the window, then I'm only looking for one kind of mode of dismissal, and that's not what I was about. I was always looking for those 3 modes of dismissal: the caught behind, LBW, and the bowled. So then I'd have to figure out a way of getting the batter into a position where I could find that length again.
Reverse swing an issue at all for you in England? We don't talk too much about reverse swing these days, but it's been a thing of the past. But your experience with the reverse swing in England?
Reverse swing in England, we never really had a lot of it. I'm just trying to cast my brain back to how many tests I played there, and I played a bunch. Maybe at the Oval, it was very dry. When Hashim scored a 100, it got very dry, and we got the ball to reverse. But it was for a brief period, and then we got the new ball again, and the new ball was the ball that was kind of doing the damage. So we managed to make inroads with that. But reverse swing is a skill in its own, which is sad to see, because we don't see it as much anymore. Now, you're not allowed to, there's no spit, and just with 2 white balls, we don't see it anymore in white ball cricket. And that's a great skill. Like I said earlier, it's so difficult to learn how to control a swinging ball. And you can give somebody a ball that is reversing. In practice, we see guys, they gorge the ball on the road or something like that, and they leave the one side perfect, and you give it to them, and then they have to learn how to control that, and they still can't do it, in practice. It's a skill that somebody like Wasim was an absolute master at. Waka was an absolute, like, off the top of my brain, those 2 guys were just amazing. And when you get it right, it's unplayable. It really is unplayable. It's difficult for batters to see, as a batter. It's tough to see where he's running in. When guys hide it, Zaire Khan was good at hiding the ball. But to go back to myself, in England, I never really used a reverse swinging ball in England. Used it more. We've had periods in India where I used it, and in South Africa, actually, in places like Port Elizabeth, where it gets quite dry. And you get that one wind that blows over your shoulder, we can get a little bit of reverse swing. But the rest of the world, not so much.
I was also looking at people, seam bowlers, especially who had great success bowling in England. And I was trying to find out where, because we've been talking so much about swing that has worked for New Zealand, seam that hasn't worked as much for India, whether there is some kind of evidence of swing bowlers being more successful in England as opposed to seam bowlers. And the first name that I find at the top of the list, Dale, is Glenn McGrath, who was not an out-and-out swing bowler. And you've got Jimmy Anderson there as well. You've got Waqar Yunus, you've got Hazelwood, all kinds of bowlers. So what really works in England, you think? Because we've been talking so much about swing versus seam.
I think just being absolutely relentless on length is what's going to be the biggest thing. Like in England, it always boils down to length. England pitches aren't particularly fast. So when you drop it a bit short, it does tend to be a bit spongy and a little bit slower. I mean, when we say this, it is marginal, but compared to other places, it is a massive difference, So guys who were relentless on length, and when you say Glenn McGrath, it doesn't surprise me, because he was absolutely relentless on bowling that length. He made you play every ball, essentially, and you just felt like every ball that he bowled, he was in the business and you were in trouble, potentially, and that's why he was so successful.
Dale, I just want to quickly interrupt you and ask you, see, Glenn McGrath, he was the guy who started that in the channel outs in the off stump. But it didn't seem the kind of length and line that he bowled, that he was looking for more leg befores of clean bowls like you would. Did he have a different kind of basic approach, which was slightly different from you?
Yeah, he used his bounce. So I think he did get, a little bit more bounce, and that's why he would probably nick more players off. But strangely enough, I was just watching a YouTube video of him bowling at Lords where he used the slope really well, and he just hit that slope, just nipping back in. There was one test match where he played against England. He got 5 for, they were like 20 for 5, and he got all of his wickets just looking to hit the ball in that channel, fourth stump, fifth stump, and just seaming it back in, hitting, middle and off, sometimes hitting the pads. And if it held its line, he'd find the edge. But he was the kind of bowler that got a little bit more bounce, so probably didn't target the stumps as much because of his height. But when he got a wicket, when it stayed a little bit low, a little bit skiddy, especially in a second innings, he cleaned up. He would go at the stumps. You could tell that was his line and length, straight at off stump, bang.
Dale, I mean, India is going to be in England for a while. They're playing 5 test matches in England, just test matches. Sure. And all of us looking forward to that. Now, you've seen the Indian seamers that are playing in this test match. You've seen the guys who are in the reserve. You've seen all of them because of IPL. You've seen Mohammad Siraj. You've seen Shardul Thakur as well, BHUVNESWAR, Kumar, all these guys. Would you have some kind of advice for anyone, who's listening, that maybe this is the kind of combination that India should go in with, provided everyone's fit, say in a test match, starting from, the first test, just the kind of core seam unit that you'd like to see in English conditions?
I mean, I like what they've got right now. I think all of those bowlers bring something different to the party. My advice is to stay fit. 5 test matches, it's a lot of test matches, and that requires a lot of bowling. That's a lot of wickets to take, and if you're going to rely on your seamers to do a lot of bowling, you're going to have to stay fit. I like Shardul Thakur. He does swing the ball beautifully, and when he learns how to get the ball to stay straight on batters, that's when he might find a lot more edges. He's another guy that's like a Tim Southee, that can swing it beautifully, but he needs to learn how to bowl that kind of scrambled one where it just holds its line and he can find the edge. Bhuvi's fantastic. Bhuvi's got all the skill. He could literally bowl in any ground in the world, and he could be successful because I think he bowls such a wonderful length, accompanied with the skill that he's got. He can swing it, and he's got the skill in his wrist to be able to seam the ball too. So India have got all the arsenal they need.
Yeah, but basically they're going to be these 5 bowlers, Steyn, that will be, India will consider that you've got Shardul Thakur there, you've got Mohammad Siraj, you've got Mohammad Shami, you've got Bumrah and Ishant Sharma. So you've seen them bowl in this particular game. It's a very small sample size, but do you like the kind of styles that the 3 have, or you would want to put in another bowler in the mix just to create, different kind of challenges for the English batsmen?
Yeah, Siraj is somebody that could come in. I think he was good. He brings a good attitude to the game too. I think that's another thing that we tend to forget when you're playing in England conditions. It's not just about like where you put the ball, but it's also the attitude that you bring with you, getting in people's faces, making them play shots that they don't particularly want to play or out of characteristic shots. I think Siraj is somebody that can do that. I saw parts of that little bit of fight that he had when he played in Australia, and I immediately knew he's going to have a good test career. So don't forget about the attitude of a fast bowler too. And maybe that's something that India would have really relished on right now, but would have come at the sacrifice of some more runs like Jadeja or something. Ashwin, great spinner.
What do you think of Umesh Yadav in England?
Quick through the air, does swing it beautifully. And you can then decide whether it's Umesh or Shami. For me, they kind of do a similar kind of thing. They both similar heights. They can both swing the ball, and then it just boils down to who you think who's bowling better in the nets, who's higher in confidence, who's in the better kind of mental space, and you let that guy go.
Right. Coming to the end of our discussion, but the crucial question. Obviously, there's a lot of Indian, following on these kinds of chats, and they've enjoyed your observations on Kane Williamson and Virat Kohli, how you would bowl to them. Now, when India is in England, of course, the 2 big stars of world cricket when it comes to also batting, Ben Stokes and Joe Root. Is there a way to go at Joe Root? start of the innings and generally bowled to him and Ben Stokes as well.
Cheapers. Yeah, no, both of these guys, they're good players. Yeah, look, you come up with these kind of plans, and I think the best players in the world, you almost have the same plans to them all round. Kohli, Williamson, Root, De Villiers, all of these guys. You're looking to try and get them out in those three modes of dismissals that I've spoken about, your LBW, your caught behind, your bowled. You throw in the odd bouncer every now and there, and then you just become aware of where they like to score their runs. Kohli likes to score runs through the covers, so you might necessarily then have to have somebody extra in the covers and at the expense of a gully or something. Root he might score more runs through third man, so you might go, okay, we don't need the cover, we're going to put him now in gully. And would
you go more full to Joe Root, who just likes to sort of go back and then come forward? Would you want to go a bit too full for him, or?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to say that he's a nick-off candidate, but I think that a lot of the modes of dismissal that I've seen him get out have been, caught behind and caught in the slips, especially in England where there is a bit of cloud cover, and we've seen the 3 test matches that I've watched so far, the ball has been swinging. It's probably going to be the one area that I'd focus primarily on, is trying to get him out, caught in the slips, caught behind.
And Ben Stokes, finally.
Jeez, Ben Stokes. Yeah, depends on what mood he's in, Such a good player. I know that when he played and we played against him, we like to come around the wicket to him. Just something different. I think he might be used to, he's comfortable with right arm seamers coming over the wicket to him. So coming around the wicket to him and trying to straighten the ball and go across him was an option that we liked. But it depends on what kind of mood you get Ben Stokes in. If he's in a free scoring kind of mood, he could score really quickly, but he'll give you chances. If he's in a defensive kind of mood, he can knuckle down, and he can also not bat the same way Pujara does, but he does put a lot of value on his wicket. But when he's in the mood, he scores runs really quickly. That also allows you to get a couple opportunities at getting him out. So one way is probably to come around the wicket and try and straighten it on, look to find the edge. But again, he's just a wonderful player.
I want to make any kind of, not predictions, but what do you expect? This marquee series, India-England 5 test match. What do you have in mind is likely to happen in this series? I won't ask for your predictions because that can get dangerous, but just what you're looking forward to.
I think there's maybe I'm out of the box kind of thinking here, but I think we might be putting a lot of emphasis on the seamers. When I think somebody like Ashwin might be the biggest key for India when it comes to this. As these test matches go on, 5 test matches, I know they're not being played at one particular venue, but I think spin is going to be the difference, and Ashwin holds that key. He's the kind of bowler that can just bowl tons and tons and tons of overs, and teams like England, Australia, that are so good at playing seamers in seamer conditions, seamer-friendly conditions, they don't tend to play spin particularly well. So Ashwin might be the biggest trump card that India has going forward. And the same thing for England. Can they find somebody who can outspin Rishabh Pant? Because the way that he bats in India against spin, it's going to be really difficult. So it might be the fight of who the better spinners are in that series.
Well, thank you, Dale. Thank you so much for your chat. We might have almost turned half English on the amount of focus that we've put on England and English conditions. Thank you so much again for being a part of this wonderful discussion on the board with ESPN Cricket. Thank you very much.
Thank you.